Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Whitfield with Drilling Contractor. We are here at the 2025 IADC Well Control Conference of the Americas in New Orleans, Louisiana. And with me right now is David Hazell of CAVU International. Now, David spoke as part of a panel that featured quite a bit of lively discussion, lots of questions about well control training and kind of thinking of different ways that we can think about well control training and how it kind of fits in sort of our modern industry. So I think we'll have quite an interesting conversation here about some of David's thoughts. So David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Stephen.
So let's first talk about one point you had made in your presentation about technical training. Now, obviously technical training has its pluses, but you had also sort of mentioned how the way in which we look at that might be a bit insufficient for some of the needs that we have within well control right now. You gave sort of a list of ways in which it might be maybe insufficient. So can you tell us a little bit about those sort of insufficiencies there?
Absolutely. I think the point to make is that the traditional well control training, we all know it 5 days every 2 years, has kept an awful lot of people safe for a long time. So it has a lot of respect. But the uncomfortable truth that it's no longer enough, not anymore. Why? Because it focuses on the individual. It tests, it trains how one person should react when something goes wrong. It tests one person's knowledge of what they've learned from a book, and it certifies how one person should react during exam conditions in a simulator. But out on the rig, in the real world, it's never about one person. It's about the team, it's about the crew, it's about the dynamic, high-stakes environment when pressure, fatigue, noise, and distraction all come together. And when that happens, technical prowess is not enough. We have to focus on some other elements of this. For example, communication. When things get tough on a rig, it's not enough just to have a textbook answer. Communication in this situation needs to be about not just transmitting information, but making sure that that information is heard and truly understood by your team. If you think about decision making on the rig, you're making decisions, decisive decisions, without having the full picture of what's going on. And that is a long way from that controlled classroom environment you have in traditional training. Leadership under pressure. It's one thing to be technically proficient, but it's another thing to actually be able to lead effectively when seconds count and the stakes are high. The ability to be able to motivate, to guide, to actually command respect under pressure is not just a soft skill, it's a critical operational capability. And these skills are not just nice to have, they complete the picture so that when pressure, fatigue, uncertainty, complexities all collide on a rig, your team is not just technically proficient, it's also battle ready.
So that's fascinating, David. So let me go to another point that you had made about training for performance versus training for compliance. Now, that sounds like a small shift in verbiage, but it also, the implication is quite significant, it seems like to me. So can you sort of explain, one, the difference between those two, and then why do we need to be training for performance versus compliance?
Sure. Well, at the moment, traditional training is for compliance. There's a regulation you have to be certified every 2 years. But that gap that I just talked about, those few missing capabilities, those missing skills, IOGP recognized the gap, and in 2014 it issued the reports 501 and 502. And it talked about well operations, crew resource management in the oil and gas field. And it listed those principles, and it trains the non-technical skills so that teams can perform to the highest level when they're under a lot of pressure. And this well operations crew resource management training is supported by high fidelity simulators. So now is the time to not just train for compliance, we have to train for performance. And it's so important right now because the oil environment, the drilling environment is evolving and it's evolving fast. We have deeper wells, we have harsher climates, we have new technologies, we have tighter margins. And every day we're faced with complex systems that demand high performance from every individual on every shift for every decision. See, crew resource management and simulations are the standard in civil aviation, in military aviation, in space. These are all industries where one single mistake can lead to catastrophic events.
Now, I want to bring one word that you've already mentioned in one of your answers, and that was the topic of conversation in the panel, simulators. Now, you are very much a proponent of the value that simulators can provide in training, and it seems like everybody else on the panel today was very much pro simulators. So you had a phrase that stuck with me about simulators conditioning the brain.
Sure.
And you had an interesting anecdote earlier about being in a fighter jet and having to think quickly, and how sort of training can kind of help you with how you think quickly. And maybe we won't go into all of that.
Sure.
But I do want you to go into this concept of simulators conditioning the brain.
Mm-hmm.
How is that the case? How does that add value in a well-controlled training construct?
The phrase simulator training conditions the brain. It's by, you do repetitive actions. You train your brain. You condition your brain so that it's building that muscle memory, that mind memory, so that when you're under high pressure, your body isn't necessarily thinking, it's automatically doing it. And I used the example of my fighter jet, where I was under a lot of pressure and it was pitching up and down, and my brain knew automatically that I had to bring the wings forward to try and get it. So you build that mental picture of what it's like to experience a real emergency, albeit you're now training in a safe environment. But you have that mental picture that allows you to remain calm and make better decisions. But that mental picture also builds your situational awareness, so you know what is coming along. So that simulator training develops, conditions your brain, influences your behaviors and your expectations going forward, and allows you to react as calmly as possible during a stressful situation.
And that's what we want. We want to stay calm under pressure.
Absolutely.
Well, David, that was fantastic. Thank you again for giving us a little snippet of the wonderful conversation that we saw earlier today here at the conference. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks very much, Steve. Enjoyed it.
And thank you for visiting drillingcontractor.org.